Hello and most welcome to the Knowledge Show, part of my YouTube channel. And today we're going to talk about Dean Radin and his, I would say, magnum opus, if that is not too much of a cast for his book, What is Real? And I found a theme in this book I wanted to compare to Sir Roger Penrose, the renowned physicist, Nobel Prize winner, and his book, The Emperor's New Mind. What is real asks a very fundamental question. What do we assume exists? What is true? And goes even deeper, what is experience? So experience and what we find in the book, The Emperor's New Mind by Sir Roger Penrose, what is consciousness? These two things are so intertwined and interlocked, so I would say it would be very hard to separate them. They are part and parcel of what it is to be an experienced human being. Never to be cut off from each other. If they are cut off, what we will lose is experience itself. That is, we will lose realizing, we will lose knowledge. And I think that there could be something very, very important, because if we start to think that something is more real than experience itself, it might be that we by then committed a grave error. And once that error is committed, that we say experience is something shielded from experience itself, my personal experience, then we are definitely on the wrong track, I would say. This is what Dean Radin is pointing to, that we have left reality, the only reality that is, and that is experience. It is still experience, but on our own experience we put a sort of a matrix. What is this matrix? Well, it's the Newtonian, Cartesian, Einsteinian paradigm. But I prefer the term matrix. And by using this matrix, we shield ourselves from our vivid, lived experience. We shield ourselves from reality itself. Yes, I know Dean Radin's book is New Age or something like that, a spiritual book, that he doesn't really go into what is true about quantum mechanics. But the thing is, he does actually, because quantum mechanics is about experience. It is the very moment when we leave the matrix, we leave the idea that we should have a model that we project onto reality, instead of reality directly. It's no exaggeration to say that quantum mechanics is experience-driven. You start with experience instead the model. And most of quantum mechanics has been built on the idea that now we are listening to reality itself, including the observer. Yes, I'm talking about you who's looking now. You are part of this. And if you shield yourself from your own experience by saying emotions does not count, do not count, or that my subjective perspective do not count, you lose reality. And the thing is, to add insult to injury, is that if you then say, from this handicapped reality, where you cut off things, you cut off the edges and say, I want to make myself objective. It is still the lived experience that you start with. You cannot escape that. You cannot jump out of your own experience. That's a fallacy. So Roger Penrose is calling out this fallacy, and so does Lee Smolin and Roberto Unger, two other great thinkers that would add to the conjecture. By the very fact that they think you can skip experience, your subjective experience, and then you can objectify, that leads to an inevitable falsehood. You're creating maybe the worst error that could ever be made. The idea that you can objectify yourself. You cannot. You go more into falsehood. You make yourself more and more wrong. The exact measure moment in quantum mechanics is what's count, and what counts for you is your own experience. And oddly enough, this experience carries a lot of stuff. There's hardly any end to it. Dean Radin lists among them telekinesis, all the different parts of parapsychology, like seeing into the future, teleportation. So parapsychology is a possibility as long as you go back to your own experience. That's a sine qua non. If you don't do that, that experience will be shielded from you. You will not be able to reach out to that or reach down to it. The fractality, as I mentioned in an earlier YouTube recording, the fractality comes to you only when you accept your own experience, when you start talking, beginning with the I, that you are the observer. If you don't do that, you lose out both on knowledge, to be correct, but you also lose out on these other perks like understanding how your own reality works, a reality that is not shielded from the reality of others, even if it doesn't make any logical sense. It doesn't make any sense, really. If you go into your subjective self, it would, according to the laws of classical physics, mean that you are leaving the communal, the collective, true reality, the perspective from nowhere, which is often termed. The view from nowhere, where we get the facts, where we find the things that are true forever, the classical laws. But even there you would be wrong. Therefore I now refer to Lee Smolin and Roberto Unger. They talk about the cosmological fallacy. And that is the idea that laws, even the laws of rationality, are not eternal. That falls in the book as true as everything else. The idea of eternal laws replaces somehow your own experience. But you cannot escape your own experience, so what happens? You take your own experience and you diminish it. You make it less vivid. You grey it out by not being able to use language flowery enough, vivid enough. You make the surroundings dead. That's one of the things that you do. You objectify nature, the surroundings. And in the process of doing so, you colden your heart. You cold the region below the neck to make that colder, numb. You sever the connection to your own body. Standing mayhaps with the arms like this. Free yourself up. Open up, yeah. Open yourself up to experience. Don't shield yourself off. By shielding, you lose reality. This is why knowledge has disappeared from our educational system, because it encourages pupils, students, whoever participate to go into a game of authority, where they replace knowledge with authority. They need somebody who approves of them to give them a grade. None of these grades come from facts or from science or knowledge. They come from a subjective, hazardous, emotionalized viewpoint. And when I say subjective in this case, we are talking about people who don't have connection with themselves and therefore not with reality. So that goes like a bit like moment 22, goes back and makes the whole thing much more problematic. Once you lose and sever the connection to the real world, when you stiffen your neck, you also lose access both to your inner self, your emotions, your needs, your wants, whatever is inside of you, as well as the outside. Both are being lost. This is why it's fair to say that we live in a civilization where knowledge doesn't have a great value. A lesson that is taught by us, by the physicists of today, who do not acknowledge the matrix as only one true way the reality can work. The objectified vision is a limited way of seeing the world, better used maybe in the laboratory or when you are constructing something, but in the actual lived experience, it's true. Dean Radin has a point. Telekinesis, teleportation, eternal souls, as you will find in the book The Emperor's New Mind, all those things are a possibility, because they have existed in every culture on earth for eternity. Those are understandings of the lived experience, just like quantum mechanics, from a measurement, not from the theory itself only. So you need to be the measuring agent. How could that happen? It can only happen once you connect yourself with your inner emotions. Isn't that odd? Sever the connection to who you are, what sort of person you are, mechanize that, as been done for such a long time in the current matrix. And I think the worst thing that really, for me as an engineer, really haunts me is they are misusing Newton in a horrible way. He would only liked to have his theory used in practical cases. He was a practical man. He would abhorred to see that it started the French Revolution or the Age of Enlightenment. To no good. To the detriment of millions of people who all suffer the fruits of revolution and remaking of the world according to Newtonian model. That is really casting maybe the greatest physicist, Sir Isaac Newton, in a really bad light. This light we have today in front of a lake is a much more beautiful light. This is illumination. This is my experience, standing in front of this lake called Sävsjön, which means the serene lake. Here you find serenity, here you find connection to the earth. Whilst you ground yourself, your experience becomes richer, more encompassing, and whole. You become wholer. And you can catch the breath again. By doing so, you also acknowledge knowledge. So think about reality as a sea or a lake of understanding. Dip yourself into that lake which I might do later. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. I might dip myself into this lake later on. Although it's a bit cold still. We're talking the 9th of May. Here up in the Nordic countries it's still pretty cold in the lakes. What could it be? 14, 15 degrees? Something like that. Yeah. So, but I used to swim in much colder lakes. I don't think they would be so troublesome, and in the end I just need to warm myself into the sun. But look there. Here is the living sun. Here we have the trees with moss, different colors of very emerald green all over the place. And this azure blue lake, it's so beautiful. This is the lived experience, and that experience has so much more to give. It's a deep ocean. William Blake said, eternity in a moment and in a grain of sand, something like that. I think he said, you have the universe. This is true. So if you take away all this outward looking for approval, which is the authority. It's not science, because the science hasn't said that for 100 years, that you should take yourself out of the equation. It says something completely different, and that is bring the observer in. Then you can have knowledge. It's not coincidence that the observer turns up in the 1920s. It was a necessity. And it came from the science of physics. Maybe the most unlikely place where you would recapture the self, your soul. I think most people would, if they were to bet on it, they would say maybe theology or psychology or philosophy. No, the message came from physics for some mad reason. And I think we should listen to this positive message and acknowledge ourselves, because knowledge has become such a rarity these days. It's like we are walking in the desert. And even when we get to the oasis, we don't have the willpower to quench our thirst. Instead, maybe we do as Kalle here, eating a really hot potato chip. And then there is nothing to drink in the desert. Desert, I need to pronounce that correct, desert. And there is nothing. This is the modern man. He takes authority instead of knowledge. Approbation, examine us, to approve, to stamp you had reached true knowledge. And for every time you do that, you demeanor yourself, you make yourself less, more obedient. And I think that's not an example to follow. Look at the Third Reich, where they followed science, or what they thought to be science, in a cold way, because they thought, by taking myself out of the equation, not being a part of the extermination, just a piece of the puzzle, then I create something greater. Did they? No. They created something horrible. This will always happen if you take yourself into the equation. And for every moment you spend time doing that, you harm yourself. You harm your intellect. It becomes less, because it can only grow if you go inside of yourself. The message from science is such a positive message, so people have a hard time acknowledging it. But it's the truth. So take the chance, join the quantum mechanics movement. Go back to yourself. Thank you very much, and have a very pleasant afternoon. Bye. Kalle, maybe?
Yes, so you gave me an idea. So we have often discussed what is evil. What is evil?
Yes.
So the question is, what is evil? So in science, we could perhaps say the evil is the idea of passive observation.
Yes.
When the Nazis did their things, of course there was some observation, passive observation, but there's real science is when we understand it's active observation, and it's also ethical observation. So I think the science goes wrong when they think ethics is separated. Like in Schrödinger's cat. So the cat is dead when a grumpy observer comes in.
Yes.
As Penrose observed in a lecture at Princeton University, he says that the cat is dead when a grumpy observer comes
When
and
you
looks.
said grumpy.
Grumpy.
With G.
Grumpy.
Yeah.
That is grumpy.
Yeah, I get it.
So instead you need to be serene. Or how would you say the adjective? Serene, like this lake. Serene, be serene, like this.
Blissful, yeah.
Be serene, like this lake. Thank you.
Yeah, there is a great connection between how you feel and the amount of knowledge you have. And you can gain more knowledge by not only objectifying. Of course, that's an option sometimes. You need to objectify. In these days, when you do science, you do something calculation, you do that. And in the laboratory to find new medicines against incurable diseases and so on. Vaccines, you name it. But now we do it all the time. It has become the standard model, and that's horrid. Because once you take yourself out of the situation, there is no knowledge. I think that's, to answer your question, there is zero knowledge if you take yourself out of the equation. And that should be your motivation before anything else. Put yourself into the equation and bliss will be your reward. Really grand bliss, like this lake. Thank you very much and bye-bye.